All right, folks, we're going to get started here in just a second. All right, here we go. Welcome in, everyone. This is the Atlanta Falcons podcast with me, Garrett Chapman. I'm really excited to jump in with you and all the good folks over there, Falcons on SI, just to bring some good content to you. The Falcons fan. Make sure to go give me a follow at GChapATL on Twitter just to stay fully up to date on everything that we have going on there. But folks, we got a good show for you set up. Look, I'm really excited. We got all of our scrimmage reactions. We got our first depth chart. We've got all kinds of awesome stuff that we got to jump into today. Plus, we have real football. Like, we have the Atlanta Falcons who are going to be lining up at Mercedes-Benz Stadium and playing some kind of football. I mean, I guess it's not going to be it's not Michael Penix. It's not Kirk Cousins. It's not any of our starters, but it's still football. Still kind of somewhat counts, right? But hey, I'll be taking your questions, so drop those in the comments, and I will get to as many as I can. But look, it's going to be a great day. We're very much excited. So let's just jump right in here. What do you say? I see a couple people are already jumping in. So welcome, Sam. I see you. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you. All right, so let's jump into the first big thing from the show. It's the scrimmage. The scrimmage yesterday was really an awesome opportunity to get a look at what the starters could potentially do against other starters. You had 1v1 opportunities, you had 1v2 opportunities, 2v2 opportunities, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And Raheem Morris said beforehand, it was really the first big opportunity for everybody. And it was, guys were had full pads on, and it was an exciting practice. And I'm going to give you one big reaction from the offense and one big reaction from the defense, and then just one other thing that I just want to throw in there. But number one is the fact that this offense, damn, folks, it wants to be explosive. And I'm sitting there standing on the sidelines talking and just chatting with some of the other members of the media. And let me tell you what, it was an oohs and ahs every single time Michael Penix dropped back to throw a pass. And if you follow the Atlanta Falcons on Twitter, they posted a lot of this stuff. If you follow me on Twitter at GChapATL, shameless plug again, you would have seen a lot of it. And it's that much more impressive when you're there in person. This is a guy who chucks the football down the field, and he's not at all afraid to let it fly. And it's a tangible difference from when Kirk Cousins is playing quarterback versus Michael Penix. And look, that's not a bad thing. It's not a knock on Kirk. It's not a knock on Michael Penix. They're just different types of quarterbacks. And Kirk is a guy who wants to kind of play within the offense a little bit. He's not somebody who wants to take risks down the field. But I said this in my recap article. It's the fact that he's a gunslinger. He wants to chuck the ball. He wants to go get it all. He wants everything. And he was not afraid to do that. He had this one throw to Ray McCloud down the right sideline. He had about a yard maybe of separation between Ray and the sideline. He was blanketed in coverage, and he just dropped it right into the bucket. And that's not a throw that Kirk Cousins makes. That's not a throw that I think a lot of quarterbacks in the NFL can make. But Michael Penix has the arm strength to really make that happen. And you had that, plus his relationship with Drake London. He really wants to get him the football. And I was joking with Mark Ramondi from ESPN, just saying, if you have a fantasy football team and you have the chance to go get Drake London, I would do yourself a favor and go draft Drake London when you when you have that opportunity, because he wants to feed him the football. And we'll get into a little bit more of our discussions here as we get into our depth chart discussion. I see some comments coming in. Trying to ask about Kobe Bryant. Yes, Austin, I see you. I'll get to you here in just a second when we get into our second point. I will get to that, I promise. But the thing is, this offense is good. This offense is fun. And I think when you have Michael Penix, a guy who has the arm strength to really do anything on a football field, it opens up everything. It opens up those deep passing lanes. He wants to get the ball outside the numbers, and a defense has to cover every inch of the field now. And then if you have a guy like Bijan Robinson, who's going to sneak in right behind when the defense drops back, that's when those home run hits can really start to play. And that's what Bijan Robinson talked a lot about. It's about how this is a unit that really wants to find that home run ball, right? And if you want to forgive the baseball analogy, I'll do another one. If he was drafted to be a home run hitter, he's been the best doubles hitter in all of the NFL, right? This is a guy who pulls off like the 10 to 20 yards, very common, right? He was top 4 in the NFL last year in those types of runs. But when you get up into the 30 plus to the super explosive runs, the things that look, Saquon Barkley did that last year. Derrick Henry does that constantly. Jahmyr Gibbs, we've seen him do that. What separates Bijan Robinson from getting up to that level, it's the ability to rip off those big explosive plays. And look, if you have a quarterback who can chuck the ball down the field, it really opens up the rest of this offense. And Zach Robinson, I mean, he's not afraid to deploy the playbook. He talked a lot about that, just about how smart Michael Penix is. And you've seen the ability, but now it's all just got to come together. But really, that was our first good look at that. The next big thing, and the point number 2, it's just the energy from the defense, right? So Jeff Ulbrich comes in here. He wants to have that attack mentality. He calls it that heart, mind, fist. And I know we're kind of wary of lots of expressions after Brotherhood a couple of years ago, but look, he's bringing that attack. He is. He's pushing the ball, or he's pushing to attack offenses and make it so that they're not attacking you and you're not reacting. He's trying to make offenses react to them as best they can. Caden Ellis was described as a leader after Grady left, and really after OTAs, he's really adopted that role. And it was said by multiple people. Bijan Robinson has described that. I believe Michael Penix has described that. Divine Diablo. Several people on this defense and offense alike have described Caden Ellis as that guy. And when you see that sort of mentality, it bleeds over everywhere. And everyone talks about James Pierce. Everyone talks about what he's been adding, what sort of element that he's added. Caden Ellis is that guy who kind of keeps everybody steady. And it's been a lot of fun, really, to watch that evolve throughout the course of training camp. But it really came to a head during this the scrimmage period. But the last big thing is the pass rush. I know everybody wants to talk about the pass rush. Everybody gets concerned about what it's going to do. And look, Raheem Morris, Terry Fontenot, they understood that this is a team that's consistently struggled to get after the passer. James Pierce, his activity, his energy, it stays high. And that's something, if you're a Falcons fan, go watch that tomorrow. Keep an eye out for it. And it's different in person because that dude is a mean SOB. I don't know if I can cuss on here, Scott. I apologize. I'll refrain from it. But that is a mean SOB. And he is as good as it gets, right? And just talking about that mentality. You saw a little bit of it. He had a sack. He blew past Caleb McGarry at one point, and then he forced a hold on the very next play. He is a bad SOB. And Leonard Floyd, that's another guy who he still got it. First play from on the defense, he picks off Kirk Cousins on a screen pass. It's incredible. It's just a big, tall guy. And it's just it shows and the capability that this defense has. If that pass rush really puts together, I'm excited about it. Arnold McCady, Jalen Walker, these are other guys who can kind of slot in. And if all those guys can come around and get you 8-ish sacks or something like that, I don't want to necessarily put that on a rookie, but this is something that you should watch here because, I mean, Jeff Ulbrich, his number one charge was to come in here and bring that attack style. And it's happened. You've seen it. But now they've really got to put everything all together. But I think you really need to get up to that 40 sack total. And if those 4 guys get you 7, 6, 7, 8 sacks, where are those other 10 to 15 sacks coming from? I think Fox can get some for you. Dorlus can get some for you. Rook, Diablo, Caden Ellis, he actually led you in sacks last year. He had 5. So I think this team is very capable of getting after the passer this year. And I can say that probably for the first time in a very, very long time, at least in my lifetime. I know I look like I'm 15 years old, but I promise I'm a little older than that. I've seen a couple of things at this point, but the one thing that I have not seen is an effective pass rush, at least with any level of consistency. But folks, I think they've got some dudes on this group. All right, let's take a look here at some of these comments. I'm trying to read these comments as quickly as they come in. Let's jump in here. AJ, I promised you, or AJ, yeah, check it out. Yeah, that throw to Ray McLeod, it was a dime. It was incredible. Dropped it right there on the sideline into the breadbasket, they say. As effective as it could have been. Excuse me. Austin, I see your question here. Let's jump into it. Kobe Bryant. Raheem Morris called him the most popular undrafted free agent that he's ever heard of. And I've seen so many questions about this guy. Look, he's a good player, a good playmaker when he was at Kansas. He's a good. And if you look at the depth chart, I'm going to pull this up right here. I don't want to be wrong about this. All right. So he comes in with the defensive reserves. And that's not all that surprising, especially given the people in front of him. It's a spot where he needs to continue playing at a high level. Lamar Jackson's probably not that Lamar Jackson, our Lamar Jackson, the guy, the cornerback for the Atlanta Falcons, he's probably going to be your top competition. But I do think that Kobe's going to make the roster. If it ended today and you had to make those cuts, I think he's somebody who could potentially jump into that 53-man roster, but he's right there teetering on the edge. And you do have to remember he is an undrafted free agent. But the Falcons also remember that this is a spot where they were struggling with depth last year. It's not one that they're really going to mess around with too much. I wouldn't be surprised if he ends up making the roster. He had an interception. I think that was more of just a right place, right time situation, rather than him going in and making like a really great play necessarily. It's a knock on him. It's a knock on Kirk Cousins who threw the ball, but I think it was just a misrun route or something like that. But still, Kobe's looked good, and the adjustment has not really seemed like it's been too big of a deal on him. All right. Happy Hudson. Yeah. So ready for a great season. It's going to be a lot of fun. Very much looking forward to it. CJ Hill, more play action equals offense can be very dangerous. Yes, you are exactly right, CJ. I mean, this is something where you had bits of elements of play action passes last year with Kirk Cousins, but it really fell apart later in the season. And it's because his mobility just isn't there. And that's something that Michael Penix has that Kirk Cousins doesn't. And we knew when the Falcons signed Kirk that he wasn't necessarily going to be a guy who's going to come in here and he's not going to run for many first downs. Let's put it that way. And Mike, I mean, he's not necessarily a run first quarterback either, but he's somebody who does have some foot speed, and you see some more quickness. You see him not scared to bail out of the pocket and potentially take a couple of hits or something like that. You saw it against the Panthers last year when he went full extension, went for the end zone and got it. It was an impressive play, and that's something that you were never going to get with Kirk Cousins. So that play action pass, that arm strength where he can throw the ball down the field, you get those deep crossers, and then you have Bijan Robinson in the backfield. Look, yeah, play action is going to be a lot of fun, and having a guy like Michael who can jump around and move in the pocket is going to be very helpful. But he still has a long way to go in that regard. He still is a little robotic when he's in the pocket, but that arm strength is special, man. It really is special. Austin, I see you got another question here. AJ, Mooney will be back either week 1 or week 2. We don't know. He may be back during training camp. Raheem Morris has been very vague on the matter. Have not gotten a clear answer from him to this point, but I do hope that he's going to come in and be a difference maker for this team because they need him to be. Because I was talking to Gabe Burns of the AJC on Wednesday, and I described it that it's a really talented unit, but it is paper thin. And it's one where they cannot afford many injuries at the wide receiver position. It was one of the spots that I really wanted them to go after somebody else in the draft potentially. But look, they had tons of needs and they were aggressive and they went and got good guys. It's not necessarily the biggest priority comparing to Xavier Watts or Billy Bowman, who's going to come in and be your nickel, much less the pass rush that we talked about a little bit already. But wide receivers a need still, and that's why they go out and sign DJ Chark, and he hasn't really made much of an impact to this point. But Darnell Mooney is somebody absolutely to keep an eye on, and I'll make sure I'll keep asking Raheem Morris about it every time I'm up there at training camp if somebody else doesn't. But yeah, very excited about that one. John Robert, yes, I see you. Michael Penix will bring out the best in Kyle Pitts. I hope you're right. I absolutely hope you're right because look, Kyle Pitts he's a talented player. He's a very good player. He's got great size, great athleticism. He's got lots of the physical ability, but we haven't seen him put it all together outside of that first year. Last year, he's still coming back from that knee injury that potentially could be a reason for some of these other ailments and other things like that. But Kyle Pitts Sr., he's senior now because he just had a son. He says he's blocked out all the haters. He talks a lot about that when he addressed the media earlier on in training camp. Hopefully he can put it all together. I'm very much excited about that one. If he can, great. Because going back to my point on wide receivers, if Kyle Pitts can come in and put together the pieces and be a solid slot guy, he's been working out with a lot of the wide receivers instead of the tight ends, then all of a sudden you're looking at a group that's not quite as paper thin because you got a guy like Kyle Pitts who's capable of running in the slot. He can play the X. He can do all kinds of stuff with that, kind of be an F or something like that as a flanker. And very interesting sorts of kind of tool, gadget type of player here for Zach Robinson. Sam, I see you here. Didn't hear much about Bijan in the scrimmage. Did they have him mainly taking handoffs or did he line up wide some? That's a great question. It looked like they were trying to feature Michael Penix a little bit more. I saw him take a couple of handoffs. He did. It was just not a lot of big stuff. And it's hard really to see what these guys can do when you get to the second level because they're not going full go. It's not 100% necessarily because they're not trying to take big hits, right? Last play of the scrimmage, it was A.J. Terrell and it was Drake London. That was a pretty big hit from A.J. Terrell. And that's not something that you really want to see happen too much, especially to a guy like Bijan Robinson or Drake London or A.J. Terrell. Those are your very important players here for the Atlanta Falcons in 2025. So no, I'm not surprised that we didn't hear too much about Bijan Robinson. That's a position where they take a lot of hits, and it's not necessary for you to load them up with hits in a scrimmage game during training camp. It's just one of those things. It's a great question. He was featured. It's just not a lot of stuff just as far as the electricity, things like that, but not a bad question at all. Let's see. Let's go into a little bit, scrolling a little bit further down. Austin, that's a good question here. Haven't heard much from Big David Onyemata. Seems like he had a quiet camp, which is kind of concerning. I wouldn't say quiet necessarily. They've just been turning that group around a lot. It's hard to tell. It's really hard to tell when these guys aren't full go, like in a game situation, what an individual on the interior defensive line is necessarily doing on a play-to-play, especially when we're watching the edges. We're specifically watching the guys on the outside. But he's done a good job. He's going to be a very important piece of this defense. He needs to get in there and clog up lanes and be important for run defense specifically, because I talked to you a little bit about how this group is focused heavily on a pass rush. One of the realities of focusing heavily on a pass rush and pushing up field is that it opens up running lanes, right? And that's where guys like Divine Diablo or Kate Nellis, who are really fast and can rally to the football, it's very important at that second level that they stay true to their assignment and not let guys get back behind you, because you can very easily get busted for big plays when you're pushing too far up the field. So a guy like David Onyemata is extremely important, but he's also one of those guys who's potentially getting phased out as the season goes along. He's on the wrong side of 30. I believe he's 31, 32 or something right in that range right now. Saying that as somebody in my 30s now, it's kind of a weird thing to say, but no, but they've got this young interior defensive line, Brandon Dorless, Ruko Rororo, like the guys like that who they want to see take that next step. Taquan Graham is in that group too. Zach Harrison is in that crew. Those are very important players along the interior defensive line, but we'll see when the bullets are flying. That was one of the things that Caleb McGarry has said to me probably 2, 3, 4 times now. It's all this stuff is great. Doesn't mean much until the live bullets are coming at you in an actual football game. Nicola, thank you for the question. Yes. How's the interior defense looking? Yeah, pretty much answered that one right there. My opinion, or Dylan, let's jump into this one. What's my opinion of Casey Washington? I like Casey Washington. I think the Falcons like Casey Washington more importantly. He's a guy who's been lining up primarily as the replacement for Darnell Mooney. And that's why, it was a little curious that I saw him here listed with the 2s. But of course, it's Darnell Mooney is going to be listed as your starter. So that tells me that there is no serious concern about the health and safety, or not health and safety, but the status, let's say, of Darnell Mooney. But Casey Washington, in the absence of Mooney, has been lining up as a starter. So I think he pretty much feels like a top 5 or top 6 option at the very least. He might even be top 4 for them at the wide receiver position, where they might carry 5 or 6. I believe they might carry 6, just depending on what they do with Jamal Agnew, who's going to be returning punts and returning kicks. That's a great question. But look, I like Casey Washington. He's made some pretty good plays. David Sills is another person to keep in mind there at the wide receiver position, because they've got a lot of dudes. They got a lot of guys. And I think they like versatile guys more importantly than that. And Casey Washington, somebody who can line up as a Z, as an X, and do all kinds of different things there. Let's see. Boy Bull. Is that Boy? There he is. Do you think Nick Nash has a chance to make the roster? Just kind of keeping on the theme here of wide receivers. So I'll jump into this one here. Yeah, I think he does. I think he's somebody who more than anything needs to have really strong preseason performances. He's somebody who I'd say he's kind of drifted away in terms of 11 on 11. I haven't been at every single training camp, so that may not be true for every single play. Obviously, I can't watch every play. But Nick is somebody who I think is trending towards a practice squad as of right now. I don't think he's going to be released outright. I don't think that that's where they stand with that right now. But he is in my opinion, on the outside looking in. But he's somebody who was extremely prolific when he was in college. It was San Jose State, I believe. He led college football in receiving, and he is very talented, and he's really good at the college level. But we'll see what he can actually do when we get into game reps. But he's somebody who needs to have a big performance and really light things up. So again, take all of these things, I guess, right now with a bit of a grain of salt, just because we need to see what this team looks like when they get into live reps, when they get into live bullets, right? It's very important that they step up and have big games, and all of this stuff's going to fluctuate. It's going to come and go, and there are more transactions that are going to be taking place later on down the line. Let's move on. Let me see some more comments here. If you have any comments, make sure drop them below. I'm trying to get to as many of these as I can just throughout the course of the show, and give me a follow while you're at it at GChapATL. Go check out everything that we have going on the site, si.com/NFL/Falcons. Make sure to jump in there. I've got all of my camp reactions, all kinds of stories, stuff like that. Talk a lot about Jeff Ulbrich and the energy that he's bringing to this program right now. And Caden Ellis, now he's really the kingpin of this defense. But jump into more of your questions here. Biggest takeaways from the depth chart. That's a great question. Let's pull this up right here. So point number one, no Troy Anderson was listed on the depth chart. I was a little bit surprised with that one at first, but really it's because he's on the PUP list, and it's a pretty easy reason to explain why he's on he's not on this, because he hasn't practiced. He hasn't been there, but he's not a guy who's necessarily at any risk of missing out on a roster spot. He's too important. He's too talented, and they invested way too much into him just based off of his draft position, right? Second round pick a couple of years ago. He's entering the final years of his contract. I can't speak directly to things I've seen just in terms of injured players and things that I'm seeing while I'm there at practice, unfortunately. So I'm sorry about that. But ultimately, this is a guy who I think that they still have a lot of hope for, a lot of expectations for. But they also go and get a Divine Diablo because he's a guy who brings a lot of athleticism similar to what you get with Troy Anderson. But he's somebody who's, largely been healthy. And the best ability is availability, they say. And Troy Anderson's been one of the biggest victims, I guess you could say, of that fact. Next big thing is that Kyle Pitts is listed as a tight end too. I don't know what to fully make of that. I know we just talked about how Michael Penix may be able to unlock some of that potential from Kyle Pitts. I hope they're right. I hope he can. If you're playing fantasy football, I'm not drafting him, just putting it that way. But Kyle Pitts is listed as tight end too. He hasn't been working out with the tight ends. But again, that speaks to his positional versatility more so than anything. The other big thing is Jamal Agnew. He comes in over David Sills. I actually thought that David Sills has been a more important player for them just in terms of team drills. He's had a lot of reps in the 11-on-11 drills. But Jamal Agnew is a guy who has another duty, right? He's going to be returning kicks. He's returning punts. He's somebody who adds a lot in that factor, right? So if he can continue to be a valuable asset for the Atlanta Falcons, then he's going to stay on the roster. But if David Sills forces the hand of Raheem Morris and Terry Fontenot and forces them to keep him on the roster, especially in the wake of potential Darnell Mooney injury, or if that extends, I don't know. Maybe you look at a David Sills. Maybe that's really what the situation is now. But Jamal Agnew, as of now, is your starting punt and kick returner, so he has that spot on the roster. But then DJ Chark also way down on the depth chart right now. And I don't think that he is, as of now, making the roster. He was your big signing that you had during camp. He's bounced around a lot. And I want to say he was most recently with the Carolina Panthers. He had a stint with the Chargers. He was, of course, down in Jacksonville. That's where he had his breakout season. But since then, he's dealt with a lot of injuries. He has not stayed healthy, and he has continued to struggle. But Sam, great question. Thank you so much for that one. Happy Hudson, this is actually a great question. And I do want to address this because I think that this is no knock on you, Happy. For anybody who's listening on podcast, do you think sitting starters in the preseason will hurt us again this season? Happy, that's a great question. No, I don't think it actually really matters all that much because the most important thing are reps in practice. And that is what they're going to be getting against the Tennessee Titans when they come to town next week. It's very important that they look good, and that's where they get their reps. And I just don't think it makes much of a difference. They're getting their game reps in practice as best they can. Of course, they're not going to be 100%. You can't replicate everything, but I don't think it really makes that much of a difference. You have guys up in Cincinnati. Look, Zach Taylor's, he's playing Joe Burrow. He's playing his starters. Will it make a big difference? I guess that can be a case study, but you also see tons of other franchises who play their guys and they come out rusty. You have other teams who don't play their guys and they come out fine. So I don't think it makes that big of a difference. I do think that the most important period of training camp is when you get to the joint practices, and that's going to be coming up next week up at Flowery Branch. All the more reason to give us a follow at GChapATL, Falcons on SI on Twitter. We'll be updating everybody on everything with that. Dylan, another good question here from Dylan. What UDFAs have the best shot of making the 53-man roster? I think as of now, it's probably Kobe Bryant, the cornerback out of Kansas. That is probably your best bet. But ultimately, you can't really hang your hat too much on UDFAs making rosters. I want to say if you go league-wide, it's probably a half player per team who makes a roster as a UDFA. But look, you'll be a practice squad guy. You get called up. Things happen. You got to be ready to go. But as of now, that's really how it feels. Nick Nash was somebody who I had on my preseason training camp roster, or pre-training camp roster prediction. I'd switched over to Kobe. I think he's just got more of an opportunity. He just brings some physicality. He's not afraid to go jump and make plays, and I think he's got a high ceiling. Nick is he's a little small, and I think that if you are a little undersized, you have to compensate for that in other areas, whether it's leaping ability, incredible catch, route running, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I think he still has a little ways to go. He's still a little raw in that department. And that's just kind of what tells me Kobe's going to be the guy to make the roster. Just in general, I'm still surprised that he was even a UDFA. I thought he was going to go in the 5th, 6th round. So maybe that tells you what I know, but who knows? Let's move on. All right. Rodney Hunt, let's jump to this really quickly. Will we see James Pierce play tomorrow night? Yes, you will. Raheem Morris confirmed that. Jalen Walker will be playing. James Pierce will be playing. Xavier Watts will be playing. Billy Bowman, Jack Nelson. Don't forget about Jack Nelson, the one offensive player that was taken in the NFL draft last spring. He will also be playing. Very excited about that. I don't know how much. I can't necessarily answer that question, but if it ends up being somewhere in the range of 2 series, I think that's good. But you will have your first opportunity to get a look at the 2025 Falcons rookies. AJ, another good question. And if you have more questions, drop them in the comments. I love taking these questions. It's actually great. You guys are doing a fantastic job. AJ, Austin, Rusty, Rodney, great questions here. If you have more, make sure to drop them in here. Also, make sure to make sure to subscribe if you haven't. I see 102 people are watching right now, and I only have 9 likes, man. Come on. If you like what you see, drop a like. I really appreciate it. It goes a long way. Really helps us support the channel and get it in front of more people. So very much appreciate all of you and all of your support, just as we're talking some Falcons, man, having a lot of fun with it. All right. So AJ, let's get to your question here. In your opinion, who are we or the media not talking about enough? That's a good question. Let's think about that one just really quickly. Tyler Algier is probably going to be my first thought there. Tyler Algier is entering a contract year. This is probably going to be his final year as an Atlanta Falcon, but he's somebody who I think is extremely important to what this team does. Very important to what they do. And I saw some people, and look, Scott and Nick, they do a great job. They talked a little bit about trade values and things like that. And Tyler Algier's name came up. They said he could potentially fetch a day 3 pick. That's right. They definitely would. But that doesn't necessarily go far enough in talking about how valuable a guy like that is to the Atlanta Falcons offense. You need to have that big dude. You need to have that guy who can push between the tackles and be very effective in short yardage situations. I think Bijan Robinson is as good a back as there is in the NFL. I think he is fully capable of having a Saquon Barkley type breakout season this season. Fully capable. I'm not predicting it. I'm saying he's fully capable, but also having a change of pace. You see how valuable that was for David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs up there in Detroit. Thunder and lightning, right? I mean, that kind of dynamic is extremely important. And I think you definitely have that with Tyler Algier. And he's a very quiet guy. He's very team-oriented too. So he's not a super big rah-rah type of dude, but he's also not a guy who's going to cause a lot of problems. So maybe that's a reason that he's not being talked about a lot. But I think he's also somebody who's going to come in and give you 500-600 yards. He's going to give you 5, 6, 7, 8 touchdowns. And look, over the course of a season and spelling Bijan Robinson, that's going to be critical, especially if we're talking about this Falcons team potentially going and winning at NFC South or making a run in the playoffs and doing something like that. So I think that's a great question from you, AJ. If you keep coming, man, you guys, you've got some fantastic questions, AJ. So if you got any more, make sure to drop them in here. Austin, what injury is Troy Anderson dealing with? I mentioned a little bit earlier, I can't get too deep into specifics, but he did go on injured reserve last year for a knee type of situation. They haven't specified anything beyond that. They haven't specified anything else as far as timetables are concerned. Just in terms of what his schedule is, Raheem Morris said he's on schedule. We asked and tried to follow up with that, and he says it may mean the regular season, it may mean training camp, it may mean a lot of different things. So outside of that, unfortunately, I don't have a lot of updates on Troy Anderson, but he is somebody who I firmly believe is going to make the active roster when it's all said and done. But he's also somebody who may end up starting the season on the PUP list and the reserve list, which means effectively it's like an IR position. And you're going to miss the first 4 games of the regular season. Hopefully we don't get to that situation. But again, that's something to kind of address when we get a little bit deeper into camp. Hopefully we have an update sooner rather than later. Rusty, I see you're talking about the Troy Anderson experiment being over, can't stay healthy. And when he's super inconsistent. Cut him and let's bring in another vet. I see where you're coming from, Rusty. It's a decent thought. It's not a half bad thought, but at the same time, you invested a 2nd-round pick into him. He's not all that expensive, and all he is a roster spot at this point, and he's going to get reps, and he's very raw too. So you saw what he's capable of doing when things go really well. I challenge you to go take a look at when he was NFC Defensive Player of the Week. I think it's 16 tackles. He had a fumble recovery for a touchdown. He has the tools. You have the potential. You've seen it on the field. But to your point, he hasn't been healthy, but he's affordable. There's nothing really to gain by cutting him, So that's something you want to hold on to guys like that. Somebody who's been he's been at Flowery Branch. He's familiar with the players. He's familiar with the staff. He's got a new defensive coordinator, and I actually think Jeff Ulbricht's scheme, simplifying things for at the second level, would make things a little bit easier for a guy like Troy Anderson. So, Rusty, I would encourage you to have a little patience with Troy. And look, at the end of the day, if it doesn't work out at the end of this season, his contract's over anyway, and you just don't re-sign him. That's just kind of where you stand. Let's move in here. Joe, I see your question about Kobe Bryant playing. Yes, he has been playing. He came off the NFI list. He was there to start camp, but then he came back. He's been back for just over a little over a week now. I think about 7 practices or something like that. He will be playing on Friday. First big opportunity there. Thank you for the question, Joe. Let's get in here. Dylan Thompson, I see that you've got a question on the Falcons offensive line. Do you think they go with Gwynn as the backup at center guard to start the season, or bringing in a vet for that role? Let's take a look at our handy dandy depth chart. Let me pull this guy up. Yeah, so Javon Gwynn right now is listed at the starting or backup center spot next to Elijah Wilkinson and Kyle Hinton. They're in that guard spot. I think there's a good chance you see him kind of play that role, but at the same time, he's been in this team for a couple of years now, and you haven't seen him take that next step. But look, Dwayne Ledford, the offensive line coach, had a very similar type of situation with Ryan Newsel, the current starting center. He held a bag for the first couple of years of his career. He was an undrafted free agent, and he was somebody who just sort of bought in and kept learning and getting better and getting better. I think that they're going to continue doing that with Javon Gwynn. I think it just makes a lot of sense staying in the system like I've talked about. I think it's very important in having that continuity. I think he's probably going to end up being the guy. But again, we're still very early in this process, and he'll likely start tomorrow. We'll get a good look at what he can do. So Dylan, keep an eye on Javon Gwynn. All right. So Hucklebuck 71, bullish. I love this. When all is said and done, do you think MPJ 9, Michael Penix, can be the best quarterback in his draft class? So that is very optimistic, Hucklebuck 71. Let's kind of break that down just a little bit. Yes, I think he's got potential to be. Do I think he will be? No, probably not, but that's okay. That's okay. And look, I'm a Falcons fan. I'm from the city of Atlanta. I love this team. I hope he's the best quarterback in the draft class. But as of right now, based off things that I've physically seen in games, no, I can't say that, because Jaden Daniels just led the Washington Commanders from the depths of a 3-4 win season and took them to an NFC Championship game. Caleb Williams was the number 1 overall pick. I think he's still got all the tools to be an electric quarterback in this league, especially when you add in the play caller that he just got up there in Ben Johnson. I think Drake May has the chance to be exceptional up there in New England. So I love this draft class. I think it has the makings of one of the better draft classes that we've seen in many, 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 many years. So again, it's not a knock on Michael Penix that he may not be the best quarterback in his draft class. He may be a top 5 quarterback of the last decade, but he still may not be one of the best quarterbacks in this class, So I just take all of it with a grain of salt. We've seen a 1 year sample size. The potential is exciting, and let's just keep it at that. But I appreciate the question. I think it's a good question and very optimistic. I hope you're right. All right, take a look here. H. Norman, he gets in here with the run defense without Grady. What does it look like? I'll admit it's left me a little worried. I'd say of the one thing that I am worried about the Atlanta Falcons this season, it is the run defense. Not necessarily because Grady Jarrett is gone per se, but it's because of the way this team is pushing up the field to go get sacks. They're very aggressive. And the thing that you see with aggressive defense is they get gashed sometimes. And I think this was something that you saw from the team. And I think this is what hurt the team last year was the inverse. It's that you got dinked and dunked all the way down the field and you would give up long possessions and then they'd score. And then it's like, oh my God, it's 10 minutes just went off the clock. I don't necessarily think that's going to be the case this year. I think you're going to give up more big plays, but I also think you're going to get a lot more sacks. And I think that's just kind of the gamble that they're going to be playing. The run defense in general, again, it's hard to tell everything just based off of training camp. They're running 75, 85%, and they're not tackling, right? So I'd say it's left a couple of holes. And also the Falcons have a really good rush offense with Bijan Robinson and everybody else. It's been the one thing that's made me concerned. And it's one thing to keep an eye on, especially early in the season when you're getting into some really talented teams. Like you've got Minnesota, you've got the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I mean, you've got a lot of talent in the running game. So that's something absolutely to keep an eye on. So H. Norman, very good call out there. AJ, another good question here from you. How does Clark Phillips fit into the DB room? Undersized for outside DB, though I think he was listed there on the depth chart. Yes, he was. If Alfred Bowman lead the slot DB race, is Phillips a cut candidate? Good question. No, I don't think he is necessarily. Of course, everybody's, when you're into the reserves, is theoretically a cut candidate. I don't have him at that level. I just don't. I think Clark Phillips has a lot of potential, and I don't think he's even come close to doing that. He did get banged up a little bit, so I don't think we're going to see him on Friday. But I actually see him as an outside cornerback. He's a little undersized, and that is going to work against him. It's why he dropped in the draft. He won the Lombardi Trophy when he was at Utah, but he's an outside cornerback. That's just what he is, and he's just a little undersized. That's just who he is. He's not an inside guy. He's not a nickel. And I think he was kind of a square peg round hole at times for him when he was trying to come in there. D. Alfred and Billy Bowman are going to be your nickelbacks. That's where the competition is really going to be found. I think Billy Bowman has the step up. I just think he's a better tackler. He's bigger than D. Alfred is, and that's just one of those things. I think Billy is going to be the guy when it's all said and done. I think he's going to actually be your first rookie that you see start for the Falcons in 2025. It's Billy Bowman. It's not James Pierce. It's not Jalen Walker. It's not Xavier Watts. It's Billy Bowman. D. Alfred, I think, is going to spell him on several occasions. But no, to answer your question about Clark Phillips, I think he's got too much on the outside. I think he's really good despite his size. Of course, he made plenty of mistakes. He got beat several times, and that's just part of being a young player at the cornerback position. He's got a lot of room to grow, and I think that's something that you might address down the line. But is Kobe Bryant showing you more than he is? No. Is Lamar Jackson showing you more than he is? No, I wouldn't say so. But look, if he's hurt for an extended period of time and he can't come in and perform, then he might be a cut candidate, to your point. Happy Hudson, another good question here. I was actually going to get to this here in just a second. So Happy, you jumped to it, and I'm going to jump to it right now with you. So Happy Hudson says, do we have a competition at kicker right now or just a depth move? Lenny Craig. I don't know how to say it. I've heard like 3-4 different ways of saying that. So I apologize. I love getting people's names correct on the first try. But Lenny Craig signed in from Germany over the offseason, had a really fantastic performance at the NFL Combine. I think he made every single one of his kicks. I don't know how many it was, 14 of 14 or something like that. Was very effective at the NFL Combine. That's why the Falcons signed him. Falcons were the first team he met with. And they were very aggressive, especially after the season that Younghoe Koo had last year where he got hurt. And then you had lots of problems trying to backfill. And it was a question because you go and sign a foreign kicker for a lot of money. I think that was more just an aggressive move because they just wanted to have an option to have a really talented kicker and to potentially keep him off of other teams. That is something that could potentially happen. And it's the fact that if he stays on the Falcons, even if he doesn't make the active roster, you can maintain him. You get a free roster spot for him. So just based off of the international player, he's from Germany, so he's in that international players program. And so the Falcons, they get other benefits too. I don't want to get too deep into that because I don't remember what they are necessarily off the top of my head. I think it's compensatory picks or things like that. But to answer your question, long story short, no, I don't think it's a quarterback or a kicker battle right now. I think the kicker position's all but settled. Younghoe Koo is going to be the starting kicker for the Atlanta Falcons. I would be very surprised if that's any different when we get to week 1. We had the scrimmage yesterday. Younghoe Koo took every single kick. And he made every single kick except for one of those end of game type situations where it was like a 63-yard field goal and it's like rushed in. He's going out there and he just launches it and he missed wide right. So he's going to be the starting kicker for the Atlanta Falcons. I don't think it's still a kicking competition. I do believe you're going to see Krieg tomorrow, but we'll see what else happens with it. I do not think that we're going to have a kicker battle. I see a lot more questions coming in here. I'm going to get to those here in just a second, but I still see a bunch of people on here. I just want to take a quick second. Thank everybody for jumping in here on my first podcast right here on the Falcons on SI, the Atlanta Falcons podcast with Garrett Chapman. Make sure to drop a like. Make sure to share with your friends. If you have a lot of Falcons fans that you know, send them your way or send me their way. Let's put it that way. Because I do love talking Atlanta Falcons football with all of you, and you guys make it possible. So I appreciate it. If you're on and you haven't dropped a like, I hope you will, because that means that we get some more folks jumping in here. Maybe some more folks get up in there. Raymond Collins, G-Man, what's happening? What do you think of our linebacker core so far? Raymond, that's a great question because I'm very excited about our linebacker core that the Falcons are throwing together. Divine Diablo especially. Caden Ellis, we know it's kind of a known commodity there at the linebacker position. He's really talented. We know what Caden Ellis is, but Divine Diablo is somebody who was referred to as an avatar, right, by Coach Ulbrich and the rest of the staff. Caden Ellis talked about it too, and I'm not talking about Aang the airbender. I'm talking about the big blue people from the Pandora, right? Like those are guys who are very big, they're very long, they're very athletic, they can jump really high, and they can run really fast. And that's kind of what Divine Diablo is. And I think he adds kind of that Troy Anderson element, maybe not quite as big as Troy is, per se. I think he's up 240 or something like that, but Divine's a little bit smaller than that, but he's very fast. He's very tall. And a funny story here, and I'll divulge you with this one. When I first saw Divine in person, it was inside during one of the rain practices where everybody moves inside and doing all the interviews, all the post stuff, all inside. And I looked over and I saw him over the corner of my shoulder, and I'm like, who's that guy? That's a big dude. Oh, it's a defensive lineman or something like that. I just didn't recognize him offhand. And then so, no, that's Divine Diablo. I'm like, the linebacker? Yeah, the linebacker. He is that big, right? He's got 33.5-inch arms, which is on par with Jake Matthews, just putting that in perspective. So he's really good in that way. And at the very least, he's going to clog up passing lanes. He's going to get those big arms up there, and he's going to bat things down, and he'll be very effective in the middle of the field. But I mean, there's a reason he's also a journeyman type of player. He played with the Raiders last year. This is his second team. He was solid with the Raiders, but he also talked about how he left a lot of meat on the bone. Wasn't fully there, wasn't fully developed in the way that he wanted to be, and he felt like he let them down. He said that. He was very open. He was very honest with us when he said that, and I appreciated that about him, and I've been very impressed with what I've seen from him so far. He's been rallying all over the field. I mean, the last practice that I saw him, not the scrimmage, but this practice before that, he had 2 or 3 TFLs. He had 6-7 sacks, or not sacks, 6-7 tackles. It was just very, very productive. And I think if they can get that in the middle of the field, somebody next to Caden Ellis, that's what they've needed for a very long time. So that's a really good situation for them there. But underneath that, Troy Anderson, I think I've talked about him already. Go check out a little bit earlier in the podcast. I talked about Troy. I do think he's going to make the roster, but we'll see the more things go along. All right, folks. Dylan Thompson. I'm trying to get to as many of these as I can, but also my voice is going to give out before too much longer. Dylan, here we go. Bigger impact between Watts and Bowman. I think that's kind of an interesting thought. Depends on how you define an impact. I think Xavier Watts has a very high ceiling. He's a guy who can really unlock potential. He's compared to Jesse Bates. That's as good as it gets. And the comparison between a nickel and a safety, I don't think it's necessarily a fair comparison to make per se. But to that end, Billy Bowman's going to start first. I already said that on the podcast. I'll say it again. Billy Bowman's going to be a starting player in the NFL before anybody else on this Falcons roster as far as the rookies go. Before James Pierce, before Jalen Walker, before Xavier Watts, before Jack Nelson, certainly. But I think Billy Bowman's showed out during camp. He's done a very effective job. He's done a very good job. And he got the primary reps with the ones during the scrimmage. We'll see him again on Friday. And Xavier Watts also has been dealing with a lot of injuries too. So that plays into it. But Jordan Fuller is somebody who got reps with Raheem Morris when they were in LA, playing with the Rams. He played in Raheem Morris's system. So there's a reason Morris felt comfortable bringing him over here to run this system. And then they find a rookie and they can spell him as needed. But I think Jordan Fuller is going to start this season as your starting safety, just as of right now. But Billy Bowman, I think, is going to be a starter right off the bat. I just think he adds a little bit more of an element in terms of run defense. And I think he's pretty good too. It's just like a ball hawk. He was very effective there with Brent Venables over there at Oklahoma. All right, I'm going to take a quick sip of water. Give me a second, folks. Give me 2 seconds. All right, we are back. Yeah, happy Hudson. Smash that like button. Thank you, buddy. Yeah, if you're jumping in the podcast, I see 120 people checking out the podcast. Make sure to like it. Make sure to subscribe to the podcast. Make sure to follow along. I'll be doing this twice a week, every single Thursday at 6 o'clock, every Tuesday at 6 o'clock, because I know Scott, he does a fantastic job in the morning. I've been following the podcast there for a long time, so I'm really excited. Kind of a surreal opportunity to be on a podcast I followed from afar for so long, but I'll be doing in the evenings, so make sure you follow along, and we'll get all this stuff here. Kelvin O'Connor, yes, the team's speed on defense is insane. Yes, you're exactly right. That's the goal for Ulbrich. They talk about the energy that they've had, the speed that they've had. Yes, that's really a big emphasis on this team this year. They've done a very good job of adding guys like that to the defense. Divine Diablo specifically is somebody who I've pointed to with that. Keaton Ellis is somebody who just wants to get an arrow. That's what he's talked about during training camp. Point to the guy, go get him. And you get that pass rush arrow, go. And that's kind of what Jeff Ulbrich does. He makes things as simple as possible. He wants to get that energy. He wants to do all that fun stuff like that, right? And when you get these killers, these big defensive guys, and they just send them in one direction, that's pretty good, So that's really what you want to see with that. And it's been very effective to this point in camp. Lots of energy, lots of speed, lots of very exciting folks. Happy Hudson, great informative show. Thank you, Dylan and Scott. Thank you, everybody. Thank you all for the fantastic questions. I had all these things I was going to get to, and when I was talking to Scott, he said that you are fantastic listeners, fantastic and engaging, just in terms of your questions. You guys have asked some awesome questions, so I need y'all to jump in here as much as you can because you guys are awesome. Hucklebuck 71. Do you think JPJ 27, James Pierce, his success in camp says more about his ceiling as a pass rusher or more about above average offensive line personnel? That is a good question. And I think for anybody who does follow me on Twitter at GChapATL, I made a post saying that James Pierce had a really good play and he had a speed rush and he got around Caleb McGarry, and then forced a holding on the very next play. I think a lot of people took that out of context, saying that I was kind of bashing Caleb McGarry. Not at all. James Pierce is just that effective. He's a first-round talent. He's a guy who some people had as going in the top 10 at various points throughout the draft, right? Throughout that process. He's very talented. He's really, really good. Now, we have absolutely no idea what his ceiling is right now, Hucklebuck 71, but I think time is going to tell with that. But I think he has all the makings of an elite pass rusher. I think he doesn't necessarily offer you everything that a Jalen Walker does per se. That's more of a chess piece. That's a guy who, he's the queen that you can move around on a board, on a chessboard, if you will. Very important type of piece. James Pierce is somebody who I think can come in and have an immediate success. He's somebody who can just pin his ears back and get after the quarterback. See ball, hit ball. He's the perfect example of that. And I think he's a perfect type of player for Jeff Ulbrich in this scheme. Just go get the quarterback. That's his number one job. So I think if of anybody who I would pick to be a rookie of the year type of candidate, James Pierce is the guy who I would have tenfold into that discussion. And I would say over Jalen Walker, over anybody else in this draft class, James Pierce is that kind of guy, because if the offense is as effective and electric as we think it is, which, look, Michael Penix was throwing the ball down the field. They're trying to go get more explosive plays with Zach Robinson in year 2. You saw a little timidness last year from him early in the season. Zach Robinson, I don't think you're going to see that necessarily with Michael Penix under center next season. But if they score a lot of points, that means your opponent is going to be in a lot more passing situations. They're going to be trying to keep up, if you will. James Pierce is going to have opportunities to get after the passer. So I think his ceiling as a pass rusher is extremely high. I think he could be very good for this team as soon as this year, but I think he's only going to continue to get better because he's big, he's strong, he's athletic, and he busts his ass. And I think that's more important than anything. He's made everybody better. A lot of people have talked about the fighting and everything else. Raheem Morris isn't a big fan of the fighting. I don't think a lot of the coaches are fans of the fighting. The offensive line certainly isn't, but they're not afraid to throw it down. But I think everybody on the Falcons so far has elevated their level of play. And I think everybody's been better for it. So James Pierce's ceiling, time will tell. I think that's a kind of an escape way of answering your question. But I'm excited to see what they can do. I think it's going to be a lot of fun to follow along. And James Pierce is going to be fun. He's been fun to cover at camp. He's been fun to watch. And he's going to be even more fun when we actually get into action. All right, let's see. We are finishing up here. I got time for 2 more questions, and then we're going to always look. If you have more questions, I want to hear them. I do want to hear more questions. AJ's got a fantasy football question. We'll do that one, and then I got time for one more. So make sure you drop in those questions. Make sure to like. Make sure to subscribe. AJ, another great question from you. Fantasy question. I have the 6th pick in my draft. CeeDee Lamb and Drake are normally there. Should I stick with Lamb, who's been great, or bet on the upside of Drake this year and take him there? Now we're getting into some interesting thoughts there. I'm not a fantasy football podcast, so I'm not going to answer too many of those types of questions necessarily, but I thought it was fun just for that. Maybe Drake can kind of see that, but CeeDee Lamb also has a Dak Prescott who's back and healthy. He's got George Pickens there. I might take a little bit of that target share from him, but that's a team who wants to throw the ball, and they're only going to throw the ball, right? Drake London's in a scheme where I think he's going to be the primary number 1, and Zach Robinson wants to feed his number 1, and he's going to get a lot of carry, right? So he's going to get a lot of touches. You saw that at the very end of last season. He was a guy who got fed the football. I think 350 yards. He had 2-3 touchdowns, 20 some odd receptions. He was fantastic at the end of the season, and for fantasy football, he's unbelievable. CeeDee Lamb is still probably a little bit above him just in terms of that ceiling, if you will. He's right up there with Jamar Chase. He's up there with the Justin Jeffersons, right? And I think Drake London is necessarily maybe in that slot right below, but he's going to get a lot of carry. He's going to get a lot of touches. So I'd probably tell you to draft CeeDee Lamb if I were a fantasy expert, but I'm not a fantasy expert. I'm a Falcons expert. So I know that Drake London's going to be damn good. And that's the promise that I can make to you. All right. All right. Any more questions? I'm trying to read these at the same time. All right, here we go. Dylan, I got one more question for you, then we'll call it a show. All right. Oh, wrong one. There you go. Dylan, what starter coming into the season is under the most pressure on defense and offense? Good question. I think on offense, it's got to be Michael Penix. I don't think that there's anybody in the NFC South, maybe even the NFL, who is under as much pressure to be effective as Michael Penix. I mean, you could say Josh Allen or something like that at a 30,000 foot level, because that's a guy who's trying to go win a Super Bowl. Lamar Jackson is somebody who's trying to go win a Super Bowl. Michael Penix is trying to get a team to the playoffs for the first time in almost a decade. It's almost been a decade. Michael Penix has to be the reason that they do it. He also very much could be the reason that they don't. So if you want to talk about pressure, that's pressure personified. And he's got weapons. He's got a stout offensive line in front of him. Some people on here have joked about Caleb McGarry. I'm not going to do that. I think Caleb McGarry is a solid right tackle. He leaves a little bit to be desired in pass protection, I will admit. But Michael's a guy who can move around. I think he'll be just fine, and it kind of plays within the flow of the offense. But it's a steady offensive line that's not going to allow a ton of pressure, a ton of sacks. It's certainly not on the lower end of everything else like that you've seen in at some level. But no, I think it's got to be Michael Penix. I think picking anybody else, I think, is somewhat disingenuous. But it's kind of a cheap answer, I guess you could say. But it's the answer. It's the number one thing for this team in 2025. What is Michael Penix going to be doing? That's just kind of the reality of the situation. Then you go to the defense. You could probably go a number of different directions. You could say Caden Ellis because he's probably the leader of the defense. You could say Jesse Bates because for a very similar reason, AJ Terrell, who just signed a big old contract a little bit earlier. And you can go a lot of different directions, but I'm going to say Leonard Floyd just because this is a pass rush that has struggled mightily over the last couple of years. It's a group that just in general has failed to live up to expectations at various points. And I think Leonard Floyd is looked at as the leader of that room. He's looked at as a very important piece of this team. And if he can come in and be effective and get you that 8.5 sack total, which is what he's done consistently throughout his career, as he has only missed, I think, 1 or 2 games going back like 8 years or so. And if he can come in and give you 8.5 sacks or something like in that range, then that would lead you in sacks. It would have led you in sacks each of the last 7 years, I want to say, just off the top of my head. He is that good. And look, I think that's steady more than anything. And that's what this defense needs, is steady. They haven't had a lot of that, especially in the pass rush. So Leonard Floyd is probably the guy, but ultimately I have a hard time coming up with a single person on defense that has that kind of pressure, just because I think they're all under pressure. You can say Jeff Holbrook's under pressure. Raheem Morris is under pressure for the defense. But it's a collective unit for the Falcons this year. Not necessarily in the same way that it is for Michael Penix. Maybe I hope I answered your question, Dylan. I think that's kind of a roundabout way of doing it, but no, that's it. But look, if you have any other questions of other things you want me to get into and you didn't get that question in, make sure to drop it in the comments. Make sure to let me know. I'm going to be coming back to watch these comments and follow up with all of them. And hopefully if I see something I like, maybe it'll be a featured part of a future podcast. I want to know what you guys want to hear. So make sure you drop a comment, make sure to like, make sure to subscribe, give me a follow at GChapATL. This was a lot of fun. This was a whole lot of fun. But remember, Scott and Nick, they're going live at 8:30 on Mondays and Wednesdays. So they'll be right back again on Monday morning. If there's content you want to see in this channel, drop a comment and let me know. But make sure you hit that like button or subscribe button to stay up to date. Give me a follow at GChapATL. Check out all of the content that we have coming out, or just head over to si.com/NFL/Falcons to get that fixed there too. My name is Garrett Chapman for Falcons on SI. This is the Atlanta Falcons podcast with Garrett Chapman, and I'll see you all very soon. Till next time, go Falcons.